Hi, I'm Mike, owner of the In Groove in Phoenix, Arizona. Today I'm going to do a video telling you guys the best 100 analog records you can purchase in 2025, in my opinion. These are records that are done all analog from tape that you can actually go into a store or online and buy today. You don't have to go on the secondary market. You don't have to pay flipper prices. These are the best of the best of what is available now. I did one of these videos a couple of years ago. I always meant to update it a little bit more frequently, but that never happened, but here we go. We're going to do the top 100 in-print analog records of 2025. Now, on the website, I also keep a running tally of these records. Now, keep in mind, the stuff I catalog on the website is the stuff that is only available in stores. Some stuff that I'm going to show you is available only online direct from the manufacturer. So this list will not be actually presented in its entirety on the website. But here, it will be in its entirety. Okay, there has been a ton of new additions to the analog scene since I made the last video. Also, since I've made the last video, I have gotten a little bit more strict on the stuff that I put on this list. If I think something is not possibly analog, or I'm a little unsure, even though it might be a great record, I have left it off of this list. You guys might have remembered the last video I did. There was a couple of records that were on those lists that were presumed to be analog, and that turned out not to be the case. So rather than have egg on my face, once again, I am relying on manufacturers who are very, very forthright with that information. So here we go. A new series since the last video. That is the Cars Shake It Up, a Rhino Reserve title. Now, this particular title was done by Chris Bellman. Now, the Rhino Reserves are not all analog. Some of them are digital, but if it is analog, it'll actually tell you here on the little Rhino Reserve tag. And in this case, it says cut from analog tape. This particular title blew me away how good it was. I got this record the first time around and I listened to it, 10 times in the store. My employees started getting annoyed because they saw me go to the record player. They had a scowl on their face because they knew what was coming. That was me playing Shake It Up. Phenomenal sounding record. The Rhino Reserve series you're going to see on this list quite a bit. They're making a lot of killer titles. Now, in the past, I have been very leery about featuring titles that I distribute. I did the very first Kirsten Atkins record. Then I'm like, you know what? I don't want there to be a conflict of interest. I distribute these. I don't think it's fair to put these on the list. But then I started going on and time passed. And I'm like, you know what? I distribute and I carry these records because of how good they sound. They need to be featured. This particular record is the latest title that I actually distribute, theingroove.com. You can get it elsewhere, but that is Benny Wallace's French Postcard. This is all analog, cut direct to 2-track tape, very similar to what Rudy Van Gelder was doing in the 50s and the 60s. Live musicians playing music all at once, recording live, direct to 2-track. The sound on this thing is absolutely phenomenal. Benny Wallace's playing is phenomenal on this. Anthony Wilson is also on this record. It's such a diverse record, Benny doesn't really have a playing style very similar to a lot of other musicians, but the types of music that's represented on this record is very diverse. But a sonic, spectacular record. Highly recommend it. All right. A carryover from the last top 100 in-print analog records you should own list, and it is a dynamite title, one of the greatest records of all time. That is Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. This is all analog, cut from the tape by Kevin Gray. Unbelievable recording. Sonically, not typical of what Motown was putting out in the era. They were not known for higher quality sounding records, but that is one of them. And that combination of not only does it sound killer, but it's such an iconic record, a must own. The next up is a record that's one of the most special records out there to me because it's the record that got me into jazz. I've talked about it quite a bit. That is Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, the very first record that I ever listened to of the jazz genre that I just said to myself, holy crap, you mean Kenny G playing Songbird is not jazz? This is also jazz? I gotta own this. And this spiraled me into a black hole of jazz, which continues to this day, still falling. Absolutely love the genre, but this was the record for me that started it all. This is all analog, cut from the original master tape by Kevin Gray, who in my opinion, hands down, has done more justice to the Blue Note catalog than any mastering engineer that's done reissues. Obviously, Rudy, we'll leave him out of this. But as far as reissuing Blue Note titles, nobody has done nearly the job that Kevin Gray has done. Phenomenal record. The Blue Note Classic Series are sub $30. It's phenomenal sounding. Another addition, as of recently, to the all analog conversation. See, years ago, it used to be just a couple of boutique labels, and every now and then Rhino and a few manufacturers would put out an analog title. Now, everybody's in the analog game except for Sony. Shame on you, Sony. But here we go. ZZ Top's Eliminator. Unbelievable record. You might confuse this as a greatest hits record because there are so many bangers on this. The sound on this is absolutely phenomenal. The Rhino Hi-Fi titles are beautiful tip-on jackets, all analog, cut from the master tape by Kevin Gray. But not only is it sonically perfection, it is so many great hits, such a pivotal album, so well produced production-wise, an absolute must-own. Almost everything in this Rhino Hi-Fi series is a must-own as far as sound quality goes. Everything musically has been fantastic so far. They've done a couple of punkish titles that aren't the most hi-fi sounding, but they're pivotal albums. They did the Sex Pistols. They did the first Stooges record. Phenomenal albums, not super hi-fi. That is not only all analog, but it is also super hi-fi and a great record. The winner of the shootout video I did on this, so the best sounding version of this album you could own and still in production now, that is the 45 RPM of Miles Davis's Kinda Blue. Cut way back in the 90s from the original 3-track master tapes by Bernie Grundman. There is no better sounding version of this record in my opinion. It is an absolute must own. Up next is the Rhino Hi-Fi of the Doobie Brothers, The Captain and Me. This is the second time this is featured on one of these videos. The last time was the Speaker's Corner. But this is cheaper than what you would get from the Speaker's Corner. And also the packaging and presentation is better. Also cut by Kevin Gray. This is the one to own. One of the greatest jazz albums of all time. And it's funny, no matter how much time goes on, this seems to be a record that is gaining more and more steam as far as pivotal, like, you know, influential records. And that is John Coltrane's A Love Supreme. This is all analog, cut from tape by Ryan K. Smith. Phenomenal sounding record, beautiful tip-on jacket. This is part of the Acoustic Sound series Verve titles that they did. One of the first titles. They continually do maybe 10 to 20 of these things a year. The series is fantastic, but that is a very important record, and it just is a record that sells better and better every year. 20 years ago, that record wasn't in the same conversation, I don't think, as Kinda Blue, Time Out, records of that nature, but now it is. It is a great record. And yeah, you can still buy for a reasonable amount of money an all analog cut of it. Up next, this is one of the best albums of the 80s. Paul Simon's clearly best album. That is Graceland. This is, no doubt about it, a demo record. This record is still in my hi-fi room when I'm demoing hi-fi gear. Paul Simon's Graceland, an unbelievably killer sounding record. Highly recommended. Another new series since the last one of these videos, that is the Bluesville series. The Bluesville series. Now, I believe the original version of Lightnin' Hopkins' Last Night Blues was recorded by Rudy Van Gelder. I believe this was a Rudy Van Gelder recorded record. Yeah, recorded originally by Rudy Van Gelder. So the recording on this is top flight, right? Everything Rudy was doing back at in Hackensack, Van Gelder. I mean, just top flight stuff. This is no exception. Not all blues was recorded really well. This one was. I actually love Lightnin' Hopkins. I'm not a huge country blues fan, but Lightnin' for me just does it. Great sounding record. Highly recommend it. Once again, another new addition to the audiophile analog bandwagon that's been going on. Greatest bandwagon of all time. That is the Vinyl File. A very stupid name, weird name to say the least, but unbelievably sonic, banger. This is absolutely fantastic. That is Nat King Cole's Christmas song. This particular one is all analog, cut from the original master tape by Joe Nino Hernandez. Not all of these vinyl files are analog, but they've been very forthright on the sourcing. They've done about 6 of these so far. This one is unbelievable. Joe did an amazing job on this. They've done Velvet Underground. They've done Frampton Comes Alive. They've done Erykah Badu, which is actually from a digital, analog to digital. So not all of these are analog, but I think in most cases they're going to be analog. But it's very easy to just check out the information from the manufacturer and find out. As of now, these are not available in stores. I hope that changes, but right now, that's not the case. Here's hoping this changes. I think this is going to be more along the lines of the Rhino Hi-Fi. In the future, they're going to open these things up to regular brick and mortar stores. But what a banger. Nat King Cole's voice is absolutely made for vinyl. He just has one of those beautiful, warm, analog sounding voices. It just resonates on a black disc. I don't know why. Some voices were made for vinyl, if that makes any sense, and that's one of them. It sounds absolutely phenomenal. Now, last go around, I had a lot of Doors featured on this list, and that is no exception. But since that list was featured last, we got a new series of Doors titles from Rhino Hi-Fi. These are all analog, cut from the original master tape by Kevin Gray. And some of the titles from the last video have been replaced by the Rhino Hi-Fis. Not all of them, but most of them have. I myself prefer 45 RPM records. If I'm given a choice, 45 versus 33, in most cases, I'm going to choose 33. Not always. Some 45s are so far above their 33 counterpart that I just can't do it. But for 1 to 2% gain at a 45 RPM, I'm going to go with the 35 when you have the organic flow of the record, the space savings on the shelf, and the cost. Not only that, it's just records have gotten so good. Mastering engineers have really figured out how to extract so much out of the record that a lot of times nowadays the 45 RPMs are such marginal improvement. Not always, but a lot of times. But Waiting for the Sun, my favorite band of all time. All of the Rhinos, I think, are must-owns from this catalog. Highly recommended. One of the most popular and probably one of the most mainstream jazz albums back in the 50s and 60s. That is Lee Morgan's The Sidewinder. This is, again, all analog, cut from the master tape by Kevin Gray, part of the Blue Note Classic series. Absolute must-own. If you're putting a little, a list together of maybe the top 10 jazz albums, there's a good chance that's kind of in the conversation. A phenomenal record. Little classical. There's not a ton of classical being made, but that starting this year has starting to change. We're starting to see more analog classical titles being manufactured. This is Scheherazade, a living stereo title. This is the Analog Productions 45 RPM, cut at 45 RPM, 2 discs. This is one of those titles that for me, it's just so much better than the 33. I picked up the 45. Now, this year, starting very soon, they're going to do a lot of 45 RPM titles from the Analog Productions Living Stereo series. They mostly were done at 33, but they're going to be doing a lot of 45s. I'm thinking a lot of these 45s are going to be sonically superior than the 33 counterparts on the big orchestral stuff. If it was a string quartet, I would say that would be probably fine at a 33, but the big orchestral stuff, the 45 in this case is unbelievable. Highly recommend it. This is the first of the Blue Note Tone Poets, or not the Blue Notes, I guess they're Blue Note Tone Poets, but not all of them are Blue Notes, and now not all of them are jazz. This is Frank Sinatra in the Wee Small Hours. This is a title that I think took everybody by surprise. It is currently sold out everywhere. That is not going to last long. This will come back into production with a vengeance. Hang out till you can get it at a retail store. Again, the point of this video is so you don't go on the secondary market and pay flipper prices. These are records that are available or will be available for the foreseeable future. The story of this record, how it came to market, the master tape that was used for this is its own video in itself. This, though, is unbelievable. All analog, cut from something better than the original master tape. It was cut from production backups. Back in the day, they were doing 2 reel-to-reels, 1 main, 1 backup, and then those backup reels just got shelved. So the master tape for decades has been used over and over and over and over again. Then they went and found fresh, essentially what were master tapes, but these master tapes have never been used before. So imagine they record this album, they record these tracks, they've got fresh, beautiful, just recorded tapes, and then they time transported via Mr. Peabody's Way Forward machine to 2025, and then had Kevin Gray with all the modern gear, still all analog, but all the modern gear, put out a record. And that's what you have here. And it is sonically spectacular. Highly recommend it. Wait for it to come back into print. A little sneaker of a title, and Rhino does this a lot. This is a Rhino Start Your Ear Off Right. This is just a normal looking pressing of Billy Cobham's Spectrum. Yellow, clear vinyl. It's $22. What they didn't tell you is this is all analog, cut from the original master tape by Kevin Gray. I talked to Kevin Gray about this myself. The amount of effort that went into making this record sound this good was above average for what is normally required on a record. There was a lot of things that needed to be done to get this record to sound this good, and boy, does it. And it's $22. There is an Analog Productions 45 of this in print. This 33 does it for me, though. Kevin knocked it out of the park with this record. Listen to Stratus. It'll absolutely blow you away. Phenomenal jazz record. Another record I use for demoing gear is Norah Jones' Come Away With Me. Again, a relatively mundane presentation. Doesn't say much, or not cut from analog tape, nothing like that. Doesn't let you know. Looks like a budget pressing, but this is all analog, cut from the original master tape. Sounds phenomenal. Her voice, magical. One of the very few records in the early 2000s that was recorded to tape, but this was. And this pressing, the cheapy pressing that's in print, is cut from that tape. Hands down, one of my favorite demo records. Everybody laughs when I'm like, what are you playing? Tennessee Ernie Ford. Like, what? Who's playing that dollar bin garbage? Oh, no. Wait till you hear this. Then I put this on in the store, in the sound room, at my house, doesn't matter where. And I have to go around and hand out drool bibs, because drool rags, because their face is just like they got punched in the face. It's unbelievable the way this record sounds. I've had originals of it. They sound good. Nothing like what this record sounds like. It is one of the best sounding records I've ever heard. It is unbelievable. Highly recommend it. Don't laugh because it's Tennessee Ernie Ford. His voice is amazing. Get this record. You'll know what I'm talking about. It'll absolutely blow you away. One of the best jazz albums of all time, and this particular jazz album is being presented here as a Blue Note tone poet. That is John Coltrane's Blue Train. Phenomenal record. Now, this is the complete master, so this is everything that was done for Blue Train. Includes a booklet with never-before-seen session photos. 2 LP set includes 7 tracks never before released on vinyl. And what's cool about this, it's all analog, cut from the original master tape, but even the bonus tracks are all analog, and that is almost never the case. This was a rare exception to where they actually went back and did a Music Matters title as a tone poet. That's not something that they want to do. They've come out and said that's not something that they're going to do. But for the anniversary of this album, they went all out. They did a dedicated mono. They did a dedicated stereo. In this case, I prefer the stereo. You get the bonus disc. It's also all analog. Phenomenal record. From Analog Productions, again, I've gotten a little bit tight on these 45 RPMs, these big deluxe box sets, although there are some featured in the set because some of them are absolutely fantastic. So some of them will be in this video, and this is one of them. Bob Marley, Exodus. This is the 45 RPM, absolutely killer record. Vinyl File actually put out a 33 of this as well. Actually, right before I went to filming this video, I was listening to both of these just recreationally. The 45 of this is such an improvement. Highly recommend it. They did a 33 of this. It's out of print, but the 45 is in print and it sounds absolutely amazing. If you're going to get one of these UHQRs, there's a lot of good ones, but that's one of the best. This next record is also from a brand new series that just came out a couple of weeks ago. That is the Decca Pure Analog series. The all analog vinyl series, iconic recordings from Decca and the Philips Archive. Now, unfortunately, this is a series that probably when you're watching this is going to be a continual series, but this record is going to be sold out. This is Salty doing Stravinsky. These are actually numbered. Now, they're a little weird in the numbering. They're all different numbers. This particular one is numbered to 3100. I've seen some numbered to 3010. These are actually done by Sidney Meyer, who was a protege with Kevin Gray, but she's doing these at Emil Berliner Studios. Very similar in the way they did the Deutsche Grammophon series, which is also numbered. The problem with all these Deccas is they're selling out right away. I think they're going to go back and do non-numbered copies. I would hope. But right now we have the numbered copies. But every one of these that I've listened to so far has absolutely blown me away. These are from the original quarter-inch 2-track tapes. Now, this particular one was actually cut at 45 RPM. They're all a little different. Some are at 45, some aren't. But highly recommend this series. Everything I've heard so far is fantastic. Although this is probably sold out now. But as of now, as of the filming of this video, you can get it. A title that I would have anticipated selling out a long time ago, but it is still around. Absolute home run of a title. This is Curtis Mayfield doing the original soundtrack to Superfly. This is all analog, cut from the original master tape by Kevin Gray. It also includes a bonus turntable mat. Now, this is a 2-disc set. Disc 1 is all analog. I'm assuming disc 2 is digital. That has a bunch of like instrumental tracks, singles cuts, that type of stuff. But the main album is all analog, cut from the original master tape by Kevin Gray. They're actually numbered as well. This is kind of a title that represents what the OJC's series morphed into, which is all analog, cut from master tape, beautiful tip-on jacket with an Obi. This is pre-Obi, and because of it, it's a little cheaper. This is the Country Blues of John Lee Hooker. All analog, cut from the original master tape by Kevin Gray. Another one of my demo go-tos, play it all the time in the store, at the house. Phenomenal sounding record, the best this has ever sounded. That is Dave Brubeck's Time Out. Now, this is the 45 RPM. This is, again, one of those examples where the 45 RPM is so much better than the 33. This was cut by Bernie Grundman, I believe from the original 3-track tape, similar to the 33, but the 45 in this case kills it. This is the Analog Productions version of this record. An absolute knockout. I'm so glad that this thing has been in production for over 10 years and they just keep on manufacturing. When this goes out of production, it is going to be a sad day, and I don't think we're ever going to get a version that sounds this good again of one of the most pivotal jazz records of all time, and arguably the best or second best jazz record of all time, at least by sales numbers. And what is interesting is right now, you can actually get the best sounding version of the first and second jazz album of all time. Today, the best sounding versions, they're both featured in this video, Dave Brubeck's Time Out and the Miles Davis Kinda Blue. They're both in print. You don't have to pay secondary market prices. Now, when these records are out of print, I think that's going to change. From Friday Music, a phenomenal sounding record, again, a 45 RPM. That is Al Di Meola's Friday Night in San Francisco. Phenomenal record. They did this at 45 RPM. This is a numbered copy, but they're not numbered any longer. But they did it at 33, they did it at 45, but this 45 RPM just cooks. Impact's one of my favorite labels. They do such a phenomenal job with packaging, presentation. Great. This next record had a little bit of a story to it. So when Kevin Gray was designing his all-tube lathe for his own label, Coherent Records, he had this master tape come in for a job from Rhino. That was War's Greatest Hits. Now, he had his all-analog rig set up in his studio, and rather than changing it out because he was doing some work on his all-analog tube rig for Coherent, he decided to cut this record from the original tape, analog tape, using his all-tube system. It originally came out as a Record Store Day title, and it was not a popular Record Store Day title, but because they didn't tell you anything about it, they didn't say it was cut from tape, all we knew it was just War's Greatest Hits for Record Store Day. Kevin Gray came out on a live stream, told everybody what the deal was. This ended up becoming like a $150, $200 record overnight. But then Rhino also, without telling anybody, a couple of years later, released it as part of the Sounds of Summer. So the only difference is rather than being on gold vinyl like it was the first time around, they put it on this vinyl, this bluish seafoam green-blue vinyl, but it's still using the all analog tube cut Kevin Gray parts. And it's $25. An absolute home run. But again, Rhino's been doing that. Every now and then they'll sneak a little nugget in there and not tell anybody, which I think is stupid. I don't agree with that. I don't think we should have to do detective work to know what we're buying, but that record is unbelievable. Another unbelievable record, a carryover from the last Top 100 Imprint Analog Records You Should Own list, is Lynyrd Skynyrd's pronounced Lynyrd Skynyrd. This is the 45 RPM version of this, done by Analog Productions. Freebird is on one side. It absolutely rocks. Highly recommend it. Not only is it a phenomenal album, but production-wise, all analog, cut from the master tape, beautiful gatefold jacket, home run, must own. Still in print, but I don't know for how much longer. Another Impex title, a title that blew everybody away. That is Kenny Dorham's Matador. Beautiful. Look at this textured jacket. They went back and they did this original linen texture jacket. Beautiful production, all analog, cut from the original master tape. This was done by Chris Bellman at Bernie Grundman Studios. This blew everybody away. I don't think anybody quite knew what to expect with this title. It's killer. Highly recommend it. Another sneak title, that, nobody expects a little boutique label from the West Coast to put out all analog titles. And this is what we have. This is from Jackpot Records, Mel Brown's Chicken Fat. Oddly enough, Verve put out a Verve by Request version of this, which is terrible, while simultaneously licensing it to Jackpot, but they gave Jackpot the tape, had Kevin Gray to do it, and Jackpot absolutely destroyed the record that not only they did themselves. Verve went out, which is UMG, the Blue Note, Verve, all the same label, Universal Music Group, but they licensed it to Jackpot, and Jackpot absolutely destroyed all other versions of this. Highly recommend this record, Mel Brown's Chicken Fat. This is the orange version, but there's like a clear version that's in print now. They're all using the same masters. Absolutely killer record. If you're not really into jazz or blues, you're more of a rock fan, I recommend trying this. It'll blow you away. It sounds so good, and it's such a fun, it's a rocking album. Mel Brown's just killing it. The guitar work on that record, awesome. One of the best jazz records of all time. Really a Miles Davis-led record, but because he was on contract with Columbia, this was really billed to Cannonball Adderley. That is Cannonball Adderley, something else. The lineup on this is amazing. Miles Davis, Cannonball Adderley, Hank Jones, Sam Jones, and Art Blakey, my favorite drummer of all time. A must-own, again, all analog, cut from the original master tape by Kevin Gray. The Blue Note Classics are unbelievable. If you're a fan of those titles in the Blue Note Classic series, they're pretty much always the most, the definitive version sounding of that record. Now, they compete with the Music Matters, they're kind of on par with the Music Matters. But for the most part, when you're dealing with Blue Note, Music Matters, Blue Note Tone Poets, and Blue Note Classics are on par with the best of the best that's ever come out on the label. This next record is by Kevin Gray's label, Coherent Records. That is the second in the series. They've done three. The Kirsten Atkins was the first. The Anthony Wilson was the second. Corey Weeds was the third. This is a phenomenal record. It's an all-star lineup. Anthony Wilson, Jeff Hamilton, John Clayton, and Gerald Clayton. I actually got this particular copy signed at the release party. I went to California for it. What an amazing sounding record. It's an amazing, the music on this is amazing, but also this is like the upper echelon of what is capable of analog. This was recorded by Kevin Gray at his studio, engineered by him, but it was done on an all-valve system. Microphones were valve, the lathe, the tube electronics throughout. It's not a solid-state system. This is an all-tube, all-valve system, exactly what pretty much Rudy Van Gelder was doing in the 50s, kind of the all direct-to-two track valve presentation. And the sonics on this thing are unbelievable. I highly recommend everything in his catalog. Sonically, they will all blow you away. But I think musically, this is the best of the three. Phenomenal record. Highly recommend it. Another 45 RPM. This one from Analog Productions, part of the Atlantic 75th series. That is Roberta Flack's Killing Me Softly. Her voice is so beautiful. Phenomenal sounding record. Highly recommend it. They don't do enough R&B records as audiophile releases, but the few that they've done so far in the industry in general, not just Analog Productions, but the few in the industry themselves have been phenomenal. And a lot of them are featured on this list. Another new series that's come out recently since the last video is the Original Jazz Classics. Now you look at this and you're like, Mike, the OJCs have been out since the 80s. Yes, but this is a different OJCs. The OJC in the 80s was like a budget label. It was like $5 and you got yourself a prestige title record, or anything that was in the OJC umbrella. Now, the OJCs are a boutique analog label. They are more expensive. They're $38.99, but this is like, again, the pinnacle of what is capable. All analog, cut from the original master tape by Kevin Gray. Beautiful tip-on jackets, thick, cardboard, unlike the original OJCs. These destroy the original OJCs production-wise in every way possible. Although a lot of the original OJCs sound phenomenal. But again, this is calling from the OJC catalog of what's available. So it could be anything from Riverside titles, Prestige titles, Pablo titles, everything that is in that kind of Concord group of labels, which Concord has the second best jazz catalog in the world, only next to Universal, who has Blue Note and Impulse. Concord, hands down, has the second best, and they knocked it out of the park with these OJC titles. This is Miles Davis's Workin'. You're going to see more of these OJCs featured on this video because they're killer. Another killer jazz record, Wes Montgomery's Bumpin'. This is part of the Acoustic Sounds series from Verve. Beautiful, all analog, cut from tape. Now, most of these in the early days were done by Ryan K. Smith, but this is actually done by Matt Luthens at the Mastering Lab, which is Analog Productions' in-house mastering lab. They used to use Ryan Smith a lot for these. Matt Luthens now has been doing them at the Mastering Lab. Matt Luthens has done killer work. He was protege with Kevin Gray. He actually did a lot of cutting with Kevin Gray at Coherent. You don't see much of that anymore, but he's doing a lot of stuff for Analog Productions, and the output has been killer. Another Rhino Reserve of an R&B title. Again, we need more of these, and this is the reason why. This sounds killer. Now, this is actually the mono version of this. Now, before, the last time I did this video, I had the stereo version of this, but this album works so much better in mono. It had a wonky stereo imaging before. I was able to get past it. It didn't bother me, but it was kind of like the Beatles, where you had hard pan instrumentation on the left, vocals on the right. It was that type of presentation. Didn't bother me, but in mono, this is so much better of a record. But Otis Redding's Otis Blue has the original version of Respect that Aretha made into a huge hit, but he wrote it. The original version is on this record, and it is dynamite. Dynamite! Okay, so, huge Doors fan. This is my favorite album of all time. I've talked about this record on video for like a decade now. I love this record. This is The Doors' LA Woman. When it comes to the Rhino Hi-Fi, I pretty much am a fan of the Rhino Hi-Fi of all the Doors, except for this album. And the reason is the two tracks on this that sound the best. So everything on this album sounds better as a Rhino Hi-Fi, except for the last two tracks on both sides of the record. That is Riders on the Storm and LA Woman. So this was a hard decision because all the other tracks sound better on the Rhino Hi-Fi, but by the nature of the 45 RPM cut, you just weren't able to touch Riders on the Storm and LA Woman because this album runs long. So this is a record that's about maybe 5, 6, 7 minutes longer than what would have been the norm back in the day. And they put LA Woman and Riders on the Storm at the tail end of both sides. So that's the side of the record. That's the part of the record that gets the most intergroove distortion. So the sonic quality is, it suffers. The sonics suffer on the tail end of the record. Because it's the two best tracks on the album and they sound better here, I went with the Analog Productions 45 RPM. LA Woman, my favorite album, but LA Woman, the tune is also my favorite track on the album. And here it is the best sounding. So here we go, the Analog Productions version of LA Woman. Like I said, though, a weird pick. I've heard this record 1,000 times, and I'm never going to play half of the album with one pressing, finish it with this pressing, and then go back to the... So we have to pick one, and here we go. We picked the 45 RPM of The Doors' LA Woman. Another Blue Note classic, all analog, cut from the original master tape by Kevin Gray. That is Lee Morgan's The Procrastinator, one of the newer titles. Lee Morgan's output on Blue Note was just killer. So good, and this is no exception. Actually, his output on other VJ and other labels was killer. The Procrastinator, phenomenal record. Listen to it quite a bit. Look at the lineup. Ron Carter's on this, Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter, Bobby Hutcherson, and Billy Higgins. What a killer record. This was a title, too, that never came out back in the day. This is a title that was recorded back in the day. It was never released, and it was released decades later. Now it's getting the full audiophile treatment. From Analog Productions, Aaron Neville's Warm Your Heart. This is all analog, cut from the master tape at 45 RPM, right? I think this is 45 RPM. This actually, I feel like this is 45. Yeah, this is 45 RPM. Everybody Plays the Fool on this is unbelievable. Again, one of my favorite tracks out of all the records I'm showing you to listen to. The sonics on it are unbelievable. His voice is unbelievable. So Everybody Plays the Fool, killer track. Feels Like Rain, killer track. His voice is spectacular. Aaron Neville, if you've not heard of Aaron Neville, go listen to some Aaron Neville. You probably have and just haven't even realized that he was a real mainstream artist in a solo artist in the late 80s, early 90s. This record is unbelievable. But also, when you think about records that were recorded analog, when you got to today and when you got past the 90s, if you were doing an analog record, you really gave a shit what the record sounded like. You cared, and you cared hard. Because by the 90s and today, you can do digital so much easier. So that's like the prime example of a record that they wanted to sound great, and it does. It's killer. One of my favorite bands of all time. This is the Talking Heads. More songs about buildings and foods. This is the Talking Heads. Unbelievable record. This is all analog. The first disc. Now, this is the deluxe version. The deluxe edition has 2 discs in it. The first disc is all analog, cut from tape. The second disc, I'm not sure. This is done by Joe Nino Hernandez, who's doing the vinyl file stuff, but the sonics on this are unbelievable. Highly recommend it. The same thing for the first album. The Talking Heads 77 was also all analog. This is the one I chose because this has kind of some more elaborate music. This is when the orchestration started getting a little bit better, and that benefits more from the audiophile analog treatment. You can get it in the box set, it's still analog. You can get the deluxe, it's still analog. You can get the single, they all use disc 1, that analog cut. From Rhino Hi-Fi, and you'll notice there's a lot of them on this list because they're mostly rock, which the last list was heavily missing because most of the labels at the time were just doing jazz. We're seeing a lot more rock on this list now because there's a lot more manufacturers doing rock. But the Rhino Hi-Fi is kind of like the creme de la creme of audiophile rock right now. And that is ZZ Top's Tres Hombres. Of their early catalog, I think this is their best record. Eliminator, which is also on this list, is the best of their later catalog. But phenomenal sounding record, all analog, cut from the original master tape by Kevin Gray. It's a home run. Pick that up. This next title is very similar to the Aaron Neville as far as a record that is recorded about as perfectly as you can get. The top echelon of recorded music, analog recorded music, and that is Hugh Masekela's Hope. This record is mind-boggling good. I have it in my demo room. This was cut from tape by Kevin Gray at Coherent, his newest studio. His newest studio is much updated since Acoustek mastering. So everything that is out of Coherent that he's done at Coherent and also did at Acoustic, there's a lot of stuff that he did at both studios. The Coherent stuff is just better. This record is unbelievable. They also did it at 45, but it's a big box set. It's sonically better, but this record is so damn good that you're really splitting hairs when it comes to how good the 33 is versus the 45. My pick is the 45 for this record. It is unbelievable. It'll blow you away. His biggest hit was Grazing in the Grasses, which he does on this. Phenomenal record. Highly recommend it. Another Rhino Hi-Fi. There's, again, a lot of them on this list. This is a record that blew me away. I've always loved Devo, and this is a phenomenal record. But when this came out, I found myself listening to it over and over and over again. It is so damn good, and it blows away. Chris Bellman did it, and it was really good. When this came out, I just was blown away. That is Devo's Freedom of Choice, all analog, cut from the master tape by Kevin Gray. Highly recommend it. Okay, a record that now is kind of associated with Christmas. When Christmas rolls around, I sell tons of them. But this is an amazing classical record. An original of this is thousands and thousands of dollars. So you can pick up the much better sounding version of it right here for sub $100. That is Ernest Ansermet's The Royal Ballet Gala Performances. It has Swan Lake, The Nutcracker, Sleeping Beauty. So it has a lot of records that are, associated with Christmas, but a phenomenal sounding record. This is one of those records that's so well done. Depending on your system, you can kind of close your eyes and feel like you're in the concert hall. You can feel like you're in the hall. It's just unbelievable. Highly recommend it. One of my favorite classical records. Probably the most consistently played classical record in my collection. Okay, another Blue Note tone poet, all analog, cut from the original master tape by Kevin Gray. That is Hank Mobley's Hank. I love Blue Note 1500 series tone poets because originals are so damn expensive. And you know what's more expensive than just like original Blue Note series 1500s? That's Hank Mobley Blue Note 1500 series titles. The Hank Mobley stuff from Blue Note constantly pulls thousands and thousands of dollars. Now this particular one is no exception. Blue Note 1560, multi-$1,000 record. So here you can pick it up for $38.99, all analog, cut from tape, and it sounds better than the original. It just does. All these 1500s sound better than the original. So this is a no-brainer pickup. Highly recommend. Hank Mobley, listen to it a couple of times this week. It sounds great. What a killer record. This has got to be one of my favorite records to play in the store because it reminds me of High Fidelity. You ever see the John Cusack movie High Fidelity, where he picks up a record and he's like, I'm going to sell 5 copies of this record, and then he plays it? I do that in the store. No different than what Cusack did on High Fidelity. And I'll go over to one of the girls at the store and I'll be like, I'm going to sell some records, and then I'll put it, and they know it's coming because it works every time. I put this record on, it blows people away, and if I've got a full store, I always sell multiple copies every time I play it. That is the Analog Productions Tony Joe White, Black and White. This particular record had Polk Salad Annie, which Elvis later recorded. Unbelievable. Willie and Laura Mae Jones, Polk Salad Annie. Phenomenal sounding record. So side 1, I think, on this is all Tony Joe White tunes. Side 2 is all covers. So you got Wichita Lineman, Look of Love, Little Green Apples, but what a killer record. And I'm telling you, people eat it up. Every time I play it in the store, it kills. Not only that, it's a phenomenally well-recorded record, so it just sounds killer. Musically, checks all the box. Sonically, checks all the box. Okay, one of the best records on contemporary, probably arguably the best record on contemporary records. That is Art Pepper meets the Rhythm Section. This is all analog, cut from the original master tape by Bernie Grundman, who got his start at Contemporary back in the 60s. No guy better to do the contemporary reissues than Bernie Grundman, and he did it here. I would say Art Pepper meets the Rhythm Section, probably considered the best record on contemporary. Although Sonny Rollins' Way Out West would be my choice. That's probably the best sounding record, or the best musical record, musically the best record on the label. Sounds killer. Highly recommend it. I did a shootout of this video years ago, and the winner of the shootout is actually still in print. For how much longer, I don't know, but I'm telling you, things don't stay in print forever, and this thing is getting long in the tooth, and as many copies have I sold as this thing, of this, there can't be many of these things able to be made anymore before those stampers wear out. I mean, this record sells like crazy. All analog, cut from the original master tape by Kevin Gray and Steve Hoffman. This is Fleetwood Mac Rumors. This is the 45 RPM version. The last time I did this video, there was a 45 in print and a 33 in print by Kevin Gray and Steve Hoffman. The 33 is out of print. All we have now is the 45, which is the better sounding of the two, but it ain't going to be in print for much longer. Highly recommend it. Don't sleep on it. Another Rhino Hi-Fi title. This is John Coltrane's Giant Steps. Now, the cover is the French cover, but Giant Steps in mono, sonically fantastic, musically fantastic. What a very important record for John Coltrane and for jazz in general. Great record. The Rhino Hi-Fi, all analog, cut by Kevin Gray, knocked it out of the park. Highly recommend it. Part of the Analog Productions Atlantic 75th series, and one of my favorite titles in the series. A title that I wasn't expecting anything of, but played it, and it's killer. It's so damn good. That is NXX Kick. What a great record from the 80s. It's, people associate this with a couple of big hits on the record, but sonically this is a killer record. Musically, this record is great from front to back. Cut at 45 RPM. Highly recommended. Who did this cut? This was done by Ryan K. Smith at Sterling. Killer record. Play it all the time in the store. People love it. A kind of a sleeper title. This is done by Sundazed Records. Sundazed not known for doing analog recorded records. I mean, that's not their thing. They're not putting out audiophile records, but in this case, they did. This is the all analog 60th anniversary edition of Buck Owens' self-titled On Capitol. What is nice about this, a lot of Buck Owens stuff had like an over saturation of reverb on it. It must have been something that was done at the mastering. I don't know what the deal was, but the Sundazed Buck Owens catalog, a lot of that embellished reverb is gone, and these records sound killer. All analog, cut from the original master tape. Almost positive this was a Kevin Gray cut as well. Kevin Gray, yeah, knocked it out of the park again. You'll see his name on this list a lot, but there's only so many cutting engineers that specialize in analog, and Kevin is one of them. So you're going to see his name on this list a lot. Another sleeper title, a title that really wasn't advertised as an all analog title, and of course it comes from Rhino. Now, when I got this, the hype sticker actually says cut from the original 1971 analog master. I want to say this was done by Chris Bellman. That is the Faces. A nod is as good as a wink. Yeah, this was done by Chris Bellman. All analog sound on this thing is absolutely phenomenal. It was a Rhino Start Your Year Off Right titles from 2026. It includes Stay With Me. What a banger of a record. Miss Judy's Farm is on this. Great record. Probably the best Faces record. Rod Stewart's killing it. Ronnie Wood's killing it. Highly recommend it. It's all analog, cut from tape. What a great record. One of, I think, the most important Blue Note tone poets, because you can find a lot of great tone poets, original Blue Note titles. So a lot of tone poets are of great Blue Note titles, and you can go back and find really clean versions of those records. They exist in the marketplace. The only problem is you're going to have to pay an absolute arm and a leg for minty original Blue Notes. No matter how much money you have, no matter how hard you've looked, like myself, I've never been able to find a clean copy of Chet Baker Sings. So when Blue Note started doing World Pacific titles, I was thrilled, especially when they did this specific World Pacific title, because it is impossible to find minty copies of this record. I've tried so hard. They just don't exist. This record, when it came out, and they didn't make enough of them, this was like a $200 to $300 record. I seen people paying $400 for those records, that record. Knowing it was coming back, they paid the price anyways. Now, it's plentiful. You can get it. But what an important record. Probably my favorite Chet Baker record. Phenomenal. Some people don't like Chet Baker's voice. I like it, but some people don't. Some people like more of his just, more of his acoustic records where he's not singing. I like both, but that's a phenomenal record. John Coltrane's Lush Life. This is part of the prestige stuff that Analog Productions did. Pretty much everything on that series, in that series, is killer. They did 50 titles, 25 in stereo, 25 in mono. I picked some of my favorites and put them on this list. This is John Coltrane's Lush Life. All analog, cut from the original master tape by Kevin Gray. From the OJC series, probably when it comes to audiophile jazz, probably my favorite series that's in production now, because they're pulling from amazing labels that just haven't gotten representation recently, and they're just knocking it out of the park. This is Bill Evans live, Bill Evans Sunday at the Village Vanguard. It's a live record, but a phenomenal live record. This is a record that's been done a gazillion times. There's UHQRs of it, there's box sets of it, there's Analog Productions 45s of it. This is what you need. This is all you need. It's cut at 33 RPM. It's all analog. It's cut from the original master tape by Kevin Gray. He knocked it out of the park. It has the original textured cover like the original. It's killer. It's under $40. You can't go wrong with it. Bill Evans, Sunday at the Village Vanguard, killer. And also to complement it, Waltz for Debbie came out as well as an OJC. But the OJC stuff has been absolutely killer. From Analog Productions, a UHQR from a band that I don't really even care for, but they did such a phenomenal job with this record, it's hard to ignore. I did a shootout of this record as well, and this is the shootout winner. This is the definitive best-sounding version of this record you can get. That is Steely Dan's Asia. I myself prefer Can't Buy a Thrill, but this sonically is by far the best-sounding version of this record, and I think sonically this is probably the best-sounding record they have. It was done so well, recorded so well back in the day. Best sounding record in their catalog, and also probably their most, this is the most mainstream commercially successful record and the best sounding version of that. This is all analog, cut by Bernie Grundman. The story with this was, whatever happened to the master tape, we don't know. Records have been cut from safeties of this as of late, the last couple of decades. Bernie Grundman actually had a safety of this that he made back in the 70s when he cut the record originally. But he ran it through a modern system. A lot of improvements to his chain has taken place over the last 50 years, and it shows in this. It sounds absolutely phenomenal. Again, it's always cool when you can go out today and buy the best sounding version of a record at retail without having to pay flipper prices. A definite pickup. A new series as well to this list, that is the Verve Vault series. They have the Acoustic Sounds Verve series, which is killer, analog. They have Verve by Request, which is so spotty and hit or miss. Most are terrible. Now they started doing Verve Vault. The Verve Vault series is the greatest artists, their greatest recordings straight from the vault. All titles cut from original analog tapes by Ryan K. Smith at Sterling Sound. Jimmy Smith, Wes Montgomery, a great record. If you want accessible jazz, stuff that's not too far out there, stuff that anybody can listen to, kids, people who are in rap, hip-hop, R&B, Jimmy Smith typically fits the bill. His stuff is very accessible. This record is no excuse. This series has been phenomenal so far. The Verve Vault series. I've got most of them that have come out now, and the Verve Vault stuff is killer. Highly recommend it. The Jimmy Smith title, great. This next one is now the most expensive Blue Note record you can buy. So if you go back and you buy originals, this is going to be the most expensive one. Anybody? That is Tina Brooks' True Blue. This didn't used to be the case, but now this is the most expensive Blue Note. So originals of this are constantly selling between the $6,000 and $8,000, $9,000 range. Here, you get a better sounding version, all analog, cut from the original master tape by Kevin Gray. This is the one to go. Not that I wouldn't personally want to own an original, but if I wanted to listen to it, that's the one I'd want to listen to. Another title from Rhino Hi-Fi, The Doors, Morrison Hotel, all analog, cut from the original master tape by Kevin Gray. Killer title. From Intervention Records. Intervention is a very small boutique label. They don't do a ton of stuff, but the stuff that they do is typically pretty killer. These were one of the first companies, too, to start actually putting a SPARS code on the record, to have truth in mastering on the hype sticker. Now, this particular record is 100% analog, AAA mastering from Real Analog Tapes, mastered by Kevin Gray at Coherent with an exquisitely restored cover. The cover is the beautiful tip-on jacket that we now expect on high-quality records, but they were doing it really early. This came out in 2007. The Flying Burrito Brothers, The Gilded Palace of Sin. Great sounding record. Huge fan, again, of Chet Baker, his Riverside stuff. Next to impossible to find clean copies, but a while back, Kevin Gray did all analog cuts. Chet Baker in New York, phenomenal record. All of Chet Baker's Riverside stuff is worth picking up, though. Highly recommend it. This is one of my favorites, Chet Baker in New York. All right, up next, I have another record that is the definitive version of that record. That is Gets Gilberto. This is the Impex one step of this record. Beautiful job they did with this. Beautiful gatefold jacket. Includes a book. Open that up for you. They knocked it out of the park with this. I did a standalone video on this if you want to watch it. Again, this is the definitive version of this record. It's always awesome when you could take a record like this that's been done 500 times, and today, for retail, you can buy the best sounding version of that record, and that's what you have here. Highly recommend Gets Gilberto from Impex Records, an Impex one step. Again, I'm leery about putting high price records on this list. They really have to be worth it, and in that case, it is. It's unbelievable. Another Rhino Reserve. There is a lot of them on this list because they're doing such a damn good job with it. I think his best record, Warren Zevon's Excitable Boy. It probably has his biggest hit on it with Werewolves of London. Not my favorite track on the record, but as a whole, this record is amazing. Front to back, this record is amazing. Cut from analog tape, I think is well done by, Chris Bellman. Knocked it out of the park. Rhino Reserve, Excitable Boy. Again, my favorite drummer of all time. This is a Blue Note. I think at the time this was called the 80th Anniversary Series. This is Art Blakey's Indestructible. This has all been merged into the Blue Note Classic line, but a great record. Absolute fiery drums. This has got Lee Morgan, Curtis Fuller, Wayne Shorter's on this. Blakey's tearing it up on this record. What a great record. Art Blakey's Indestructible. All analog, cut from the original master tape, like all Blue Note classics, by Kevin Gray. You're going to see, for such a small boutique label, you're going to see a lot of Impex records on this list because Impex really does a killer job. Earth, Wind, and Fire, that's the way of the world. This is unbelievable. Speaker's Corner does it. Impex does it. They're both in print. The Impex is the definitive version by all accounts. Done by Kevin Gray as well, I believe. Yeah, this is done by Kevin Gray at Coherent. You know, when you put this on for the very first time, the opening track, which is, I think that's the way of the world, right? Let me look. Shining Star. Shining Star. You know that bump, 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 you know, that killer bass guitar combo in the beginning? It just screams out of the speakers. It just sounds awesome. I highly recommend this record. Beautiful tip-on jacket as well. They did the full presentation packaging-wise, but what a great title. Again, all analog, cut by tape, from tape by Kevin Gray. Earlier, I mentioned a few artists that their voice just resonates with vinyl, and I'll stand by that. Tennessee Ernie Ford, Dean Martin's one of them. Nat King Cole is one of them. Probably one of the best, though, is Roy Orbison's Crying. This, Roy Orbison in general, but this record, Crying, unbelievable. This is done by Analog Productions. It is still in print. It's been in print for a long time. Who did this, Bernie? Yeah, this was done by Bernie Grundman, probably from the original Classic Records parts. But, wow, his voice is... I can't speak more highly to this record. It is killer. And unfortunately, Roy doesn't sell like he should. I really feel these records should just be flying off the shelf, but the newer generation just really isn't latching on to Roy Orbison. I don't sell a ton of Roy Orbison records, but his stuff on Monument is unbelievable. It's so well recorded. He had so many great tunes, so many hits, but just great tunes in general. They don't sell like they should, but man, his voice is just made for vinyl. It sounds killer. Analog Productions. This is cut at 45 RPM. A second title from Jackpot Records. Again, a label you just don't associate with making audiophile records, but Jackpot a lot of times uses analog tape, and they send it to Kevin Gray. And when you take analog tapes, send them to Kevin Gray, magical things happen. Even though they do cheap covers and they do stupid splatter vinyl, which I'm not a fan of, man, they knock it out of the park with some of their titles, and this is no exception. Etta James, the second time around. All analog process from the original master tapes cut by Kevin Gray. And despite the colored vinyl and the jacket, this record is killer. It sounds so damn good. I highly recommend it. Great title from Jackpot. Another Impex title. This was a record that everybody faux pas because it looks stupid. It just looks like a stupid record, doesn't it? Pacific Jazz Records, Bud Shank's Barefooted Adventure. This is a soundtrack. But when you look at this, what do you think? You think this is a soundtrack for a surf movie, do you not? A surf documentary? And it is. This is a soundtrack to a surf documentary. But the bizarre thing about the soundtrack to this surf documentary is they use a proper jazz band. No surf music whatsoever. Bud Shank is just doing killer, proper jazz tunes. This record sonically is killer, musically is killer. Pay no attention to this. If you're a jazz fan, pay no attention to this surfing going on the front. Never seen this documentary. Who knows if anybody has. All analog, cut from the original master tapes by Kevin Gray. He knocked it out of the park. The record sounds phenomenal. It is in print. You can get it now. It's great. Probably, I think, the best record on Prestige, one of the best record labels of all time. Probably the second best jazz label of all time, only behind Blue Note. And I think this is the best record on the label, and I think this is also Sonny Rollins considered his best record. My favorite is Way Out West, but Saxophone Colossus considered his masterpiece. This record is killer. All analog, cut from the original master tape by Kevin Gray. This is the Analog Productions version of it. Again, they did 25 titles in mono, 25 in stereo. This particular one is part of the mono series. These were out of print for a lot of years. And when these things went out of print, they became multi-$100 records. Now they're in print. We don't have to worry about that anymore. But there's a reason they went up in price so much when they went out of print. And that's because they were so damn good. Saxophone Colossus, no brainer, pick that up. Another Rhino Hi-Fi title. Unbelievable record. Changed the course of music in the 70s, really, when you think about it. It introduced the world to the modern Fleetwood Mac. This is the Rhino Hi-Fi of the self-titled Fleetwood Mac. Normally self-titled would be the band's first record. This isn't. This is the band's 10th record. But this is the self-titled record, the first one with Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks. And that definitely changed the band forever. The follow-up, Rumors, became one of the best-selling records of all time. Definitely one of the most iconic 70s records. But this record as well is loaded with hits. This is killer. All analog, cut from the master tape by Kevin Gray. What a killer record. Titles like this weren't available on the list when I did this last. You didn't get great audiophile titles of like top tier rock records cut at 33 RPM. That has changed, and I'm here for it. Herbie Hancock's Headhunters. All analog, cut from the original master tape. I want to say Bernie Grundman did this. This is part of the Acoustic Sounds lineup. No, Ryan K. Smith did this. Excuse me. Ryan K. Smith did this. It's also available at 33, but the 45 of this is quite a step better. One of those titles, I'll spring for the 45. Great sounding record. One of Herbie Hancock's funkiest. It's got Watermelon Man on it. Headhunters is just a banger of a record. Highly recommended. Although I highly recommend a lot of Herbie Hancock stuff. If you're newer to Herbie Hancock, that's a good place to start because it's such a funky record. A lot of people, who aren't jazz fans, are really going to dig that record. Up next from the Acoustic Sounds Verve catalog, we've got John Coltrane's Ballads. A very accessible record. If you're new to jazz, highly recommended. It's a great record. It's not like you typically think of John Coltrane with the out there stuff. This record is not out there. It's very accessible, easy to listen to. John Coltrane's Ballads. Few blues records on this list, and although I love Muddy Waters, this is my least favorite Muddy Waters record because I don't really care for his folky country blues. I like his more electrified Chicago blues. But there is no denying how killer this record is sonically, and still, in the grand scheme of things, musically fantastic. And I say the grand scheme of things because Muddy Waters is a step above, I think, most all blues musicians. That is Muddy Waters Folk Singer. I did a shootout of this video as well, of this record as well, comparing originals, Mobile Fidelity versions, you name it. I had originals, 70s pressings, 80 pressings. This came out on top. This is the definitive version of this record. And again, you can buy it. It's in production today. That is the 45 RPM Muddy Waters Folk Singer. This is a record that I don't understand. I've had this in the video, on the list for years. And for some reason, this record hasn't sold out. They only made, 3,000 of these? And it is unbelievable. Bernie Grundman absolutely knocked it out of the park with this record. It is killer. Ooh. My copy is number 666. So maybe my copy made a deal with the devil. I don't know, but this freaking record slams. Isaac Hayes, Hot Buttered Soul, cut by Bernie Grundman, part of the Kraft One Step series. I think this series kind of went away. I don't think, this kind of came out during a different time in vinyl when everything was going crazy and it sold like crazy. Then they did some stupid choices title-wise. They didn't sell that well, and then no more of them have come out. Not sure what the hell they were doing or why they were doing it, but man, this was the best of the best. Isaac Hayes, Hot Butter Soul. While you can get it, pick it up. Who knows? Maybe people will never get hip to how killer that record is musically and sonically. But man, sonically, the bass on that is ferocious. It's a killer record. Analog Productions, Smokin' from Humble Pie. Killer record. 30 Days in the Hole just slams on this record. This is the 33 RPM version. This was cut by Kevin Gray, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, right. Kevin Gray at Acoustech Mastering. So this is using older stampers. They did this record back in the day, but it is back in print. Killer record. Humble Pies, Smokin'. My favorite Sonny Rollins record, like I mentioned earlier, and in print now, this is Sonny Rollins, Way Out West. This is a phenomenal record. I love it. Again, it's just killer. Photograph on the cover is awesome as well. My favorite Sonny Rollins record. My favorite record on Contemporary, Sonny Rollins, Way Out West. All analog, cut by Bernie Grundman. Again, the guy who was working there in the 60s, still cutting records today into his 80s. Get a killer job on this. He's the man to do the Contemporary catalog. This was part of a Contemporary reissue catalog. I don't think it sold very well, so they kind of stopped producing new titles, but they did get to Way Out West, which is great. They got to Art Pepper Meets the Rhythm section, so they got some of the better titles out of the way. So in production, we still have the ability to buy Way Out West. I hope they come out with more of these. They've kind of slowed down on the jazz dispensary titles. They're still coming out with them, but they're coming out a lot, less frequently than they did. Idris Muhammad's Black Rhythm Revolution. Pretty much all the jazz dispensary titles have been home runs. This has been no exception. Killer record. Highly recommend it. These are also all analog, cut from the master tape by Kevin Gray. Beautiful tip-on jacket as well. The jazz dispensary titles pull from Concord's catalog, but it's not necessarily just prestige titles. It's anything within the Concord catalog, but that leans on the funk side. So, great series. If you like funk, you're going to love that series. Again, a little nugget that was put out a while back with a misleading hype sticker, because this is Foghat's Fool for the City. This was put out with a hype sticker that says, lacquers cut directly from the original analog stereo tapes by Kevin Gray. It's cut by Chris Bellman. So leave that aside. This record is killer. What's great about this is this record, the way it's cut and the way it's mastered, has such a heavy emphasis on the guitar. And I mean, the guitar is prominent in this record, and it just screams out. It's got Slow Ride and Fool for the City, as mentioned on the hype sticker. But I'm telling you, this is kind of just a blistering classic rock record with just the guitar licks just up front and center. Great record. The disc 1 on this is all analog, cut from tape. I would doubt that disc 2 is analog because there's a bonus disc on here. Maybe not, but the main record is. That's what matters. Another Blue Note Tone Poet, all analog, cut from the master tape. I love organ. You don't see a lot of organ jazz being reissued. The audiences nowadays, they tend to prefer the blowers, but Organ sonically done right is killer. This is no exception. Babyface Wylette, Face to Face. Killer organ work on this. It's got Grant Green on guitar, which is never a bad thing. Great record. Another Rhino Reserve, and again, there's a bunch of them on this list because they're so damn good. This is Yes's 90125. All analog, cut from tape by Matt Luthans. Just such a huge record from the 80s. Done, by the way, too, I haven't mentioned this. All the Rhino Reserves are actually done by Fidelity Pressing, which is making, in my opinion, the best sounding. I don't want to say sounding because that comes to mastering, but it does sounding. The pressing plant determines the sound of the record as well. They are making, in my opinion, today, the highest quality, best sounding, no low noise floor records in the United States today. They're just knocking it out of the park. Why the Rhino Reserve is made there and not the Rhino Hi-Fi, which is their premium line, boggles my mind. There must be some contractual obligations there. But why they are having an inferior pressing plant do Rhino Hi-Fis and then having Fidelity do their lower budget price series is beyond me, but that's what the hell's going on. But yeah, Rhino Reserves are killer sonically, pressing-wise. They just knock it out of the park. Most of Neil Young's catalog, when available, is done from master tape. This is no exception. This is Neil Young with Crazy Horse. Everybody knows This Is Nowhere. Has Cinnamon Girl on it. What more can you say? It's all analog. It's cut from tape. A lot of the newer versions of this record have the SPARS code on it that tell you directly, whether on the hype sticker or on the SPARS code, that it is cut from the original analog tape. Highly recommend the Neil Young catalog that's coming out. Even the stuff that's done digitally sounds pretty freaking awesome. I want to say Chris Bellman or Bernie Grumman, somebody at Bernie Grumman, I think it's one of the two, does all of Neil Young's reissues and has for years. I think it's Chris Bellman. And sonically, they just are killer. I had to pick a couple of my favorites, so that's one of them. Got another one coming up. Another great blues record, that is the legendary Son House, father of the folk blues. This is done at 33 and 45. I chose the 45 in this case. It absolutely is killer. Love this record. I'm not a huge blues fan, so when I pick a blues record, it really is like the creme de la creme. Done by Analog Productions, great sounding record. I think this is the latest of the Jazz Dispensary titles. This is a bizarre record. Listen to this if you haven't had a chance. When you think of Cal Tjader, this isn't what comes to mind sonically. This record is great. I did a listening party of this in the store. Nobody came, but I'm telling you, everybody that was there at the store loved it. It's just a great record. The Jazz Dispensary, top shelf, all analog, cut from the original master tape by Kevin Gray. Again, most of them, if not all of them, are. But this just has... The vibes on this are just killer, and it's just such a funky, fusion-y... It highly recommend it. Stream this if you haven't had a chance to listen to it. This originally came out on the Fantasy label. But this isn't the traditional Cal Tjader you would think of the 50s and 60s. This is a different record, and originals of this are very hard to find, and they're pricey. Another classical title, again, a 45 RPM, because the big orchestral stuff just sounds killer at 45 RPM. Tchaikovsky, Rhapsodies. 45 RPM, done by Analog Productions. Again, they've got a bunch of 45s coming out. I'm guessing they're going to be great. This particular one is part of the original kind of 4-5 they did at 45 RPM. But yeah, highly recommend. All the Living Stereo titles are great, but what I'm showing you is kind of the best of the best. There's two versions of this record out analog right now. There's this, which is Wild Flowers and All the Rest by Tom Petty. All analog, cut from the original master tape by Chris Bellman, I want to say. Pretty sure Chris Bellman. Yes, by Chris Bellman. This is the 3-disc version of the album with the songs kind of the way Tom Petty originally intended it to come out, but the label kind of gave him a hard time and he trimmed it back. Tom Petty, Wildflowers, and All the Rest. You can actually get this also done by Chris Bellman as just the standard album, the way it came out back in the day, as a Because Sound Matters one step. Why pay the extra $65 more for less music is beyond me. I think this is the way to go. Tom Petty, Wildflowers, and all the rest, all analog, cut from the original master tape by Chris Bellman, and it sounds absolutely killer, and it's the 3-disc version. If you want just the standard 2-disc version, buy the 1-step. Sounds great as well. Phenomenal record. Love the Cars. This is no exception. This is the Rhino Hi-Fi of the Cars Candy-O. Just a killer rock record. All analog, cut from the original master tape by Kevin Gray. Can't recommend this, more highly. It's just a great sounding record. Thank God for the Rhino Hi-Fis. We are just getting so many killer audiophile, high quality sounding rock titles because of the Rhino. Not only Rhino Hi-Fi, but also the Rhino Reserve series. Okay. Originals of this are like $1,000. They were for a long time. They might have been coming down. Classical in general has been coming down a little bit. But for a long time, this was like the quintessential living stereo title. That is Faust's ballet music and the Carmen Suite. But that's Carmen Suite. Phenomenal record. Killer. I hope this is one that gets done at 45. I can't wait to hear it. Sonically, it's going to kill. But this is the 33 of this record. It sounds great. All analog, cut from tape. One of my favorite of the Living Stereo series. I did a video years back of jazz records for people who don't like jazz, kind of to ease you into it. And this was one of them that was featured, not only because it's sonically killer and it's going to draw you in because it's so well done, but it is super funky. It's got so many killer drum beats on it. If you're into rap, into hip hop, you're going to love this record. That's Lou Donaldson's Mr. Shingling. Great record. Really accessible, not your typical jazz record that, if you're not a jazz fan, you might have a difficult time getting into. This is great. Another Rhino Hi-Fi, because they're so damn good, that is Stevie Nicks' Belladonna. All analog, cut from the original master tape by Kevin Gray. Has my favorite Stevie Nicks song on it, Edge of 17. What a killer track. What a, visceral, high energy tune. Sounds killer here. Beautiful tip-on jacket. The Rhino Hi-Fis, man, it's a series I hope lasts for a long, long time. This originally was on my list as a Speaker's Corner title, but Kevin Gray cut this as a Rhino Hi-Fi. That is Herbie Hancock's Crossings. So it just made sense, production-wise, to put it in as the Hi-Fi, because this is going to be the superior version between the two. Herbie Hancock's Crossings from Rhino. Beautiful tip-on jacket. Yeah. The other Neil Young record, I think this is probably considered his best album. It's definitely his most commercial successful of this period, I would think. That is Neil Young's Harvest. It is actually a carryover from the last time I did this list. Has a ton of hits on it. Sonically, it's spectacular. All analog. I'm curious. I want to say it was Chris Bellman. I told you earlier, Bernie or Chris Bellman. I think it's Bellman. It is Chris Bellman. But beautiful sounding record. And also, they did a beautiful texture jacket on it, just like the original. This is the version you want. It sounds great. I think these two, again, everything that was analog back in the day, Neil Young puts out as analog, but I wanted to pick what I thought were his better records. Neil Young's Harvest. All right, we're on the final stretch. This is a Blue Note tone poet of a record that is very difficult to get. Capitol Records, not known really for jazz, but what a great record. This is Sarge Karloff's Blue Sarge. What a killer record. Sonny Clark's on piano, Joe Jones on drums, and Leroy Vinegar on bass. A great record. Again, a sleeper title within the Capitol catalog. You got a couple of bangers on Capitol. You got Birth of the Cool, but you also have Blue Sarge. What a great record. I'm so glad they chose to do this as a Blue Note tone poet. It's a sleeper title. It's a great jazz record that very few people talk about. I recommend it. Pick it up. Sonically, it's great. And what a lineup and what a great musical record. It's just fantastic. A carryover from last time, we've got Nina Simone's Pastel Blues. This has Strange Fruit on it. It also has Cinnamon on it. This is a record that really resonates with younger people. I sell a ton of them, and sonically, this record is killer. It's all analog. It's cut from the original master tape. It's one of the first Acoustic Sounds Verve titles. So I want to say it was cut by Ryan K. Smith, which it was. Killer. Just what a great record. Pick this up if you haven't already. Again, it's been on the list for a while. Definitely worth the pickup. Blue Note Tone Poet, one of my favorites. Lee Morgan's The Cooker, but like I mentioned earlier, I really love most of Lee Morgan's output. This is all analog, cut from the original master tape by Kevin Gray. Great record. Another Blue Note artist that I really like all of his output, and that is Grant Green's Born to Be Blue. It's amazing. For a lot of years, the blowers, the horn players, they were the ones that sold the best. Those were the most in-demand records. They went for the biggest bucks. But Grant Green, man, is really changing that. The modern buyer really goes for Grant Green. They want guitar players. I sell a ton of Kenny Burrell and a ton of Grant Green. What a great record. Born to Be Blue. You got Sonny Clark on this as well. IQ Beck, Sam Jones on bass. Great record. Sell a ton of Grant Green. This was a sleeper record, a record that anytime that they put a Blue Note Tone Poet out that's not a Blue Note, I take note, because the Blue Note stuff is great. But their goal is to put pretty much the Blue Note catalog out. That seems to be the mission, right? Between the Tone Poets and the Blue Note catalog, Blue Note classics. But anytime they do a non-Blue Note title, and I'm not familiar with it, it gets my attention because they're typically, actually, I say typically, they've all been killer. They've all been amazing. There's been no duds, and this is no exception. This is Curtis Amy's Katanga. What a freaking killer record. A record that I wasn't familiar with. I heard as a Blue Note Tone Poet and it blew my mind. It is so damn good. Highly recommend it. Pick it up. Again, all of the Tone Poets that haven't been Blue Note, whether it's the Frank Sinatra, the World Pacific title, the Chet Baker Sings, they've all been killer. There's a Gerald Wilson that's killer. Highly recommend them all. Sonny Rollins Plays for Birds, one of my favorite Sonny Rollins records. There is a track on this record, and I'm telling you, I love it. I get a kick out of it. I wait for it every time. So he's playing They Can't Take That Away From Me. And there's a part in this record where he just leans in with the horn into the microphone and he just blows a note, and I get shivers every time I hear it. It's so well recorded, and musically it's so fantastic. Highly recommend this record. Sonny Rollins Plays for Birds. This is an all analog, cut by Kevin Gray title from Analog Productions, part of the Prestige 50 series they did. I didn't mention a ton of these on this list, but they are all absolutely fantastic. It is one of the best sounding labels you were ever going to hear. That is Pablo. This is Count Basie 6. Count Basie 6 is the name of the album. Kansas City, I guess, would be considered the... Count Basie 6 is the band. Kansas City is the artist. They do a tune on this that I really like, and this is the reason I picked it. It's called Vegas Drag. Pablo's an interesting series. For a lot of years, nobody wanted these. These were dollar records. You couldn't give Pablo titles away. Pablo's got a lot of steam in recent years. People have realized sonically how freaking amazing these records are. Now, granted, it's a lot of artists like Count Basie, Duke Ellington, and Ella Fitzgerald towards the end of their career. But man, musically, they're great, but it is more of that style of jazz. It's not the heavier bebop stuff. It's your typical swing. But sonically, these records are great, and the average jazz buyer now is newer. They're a younger group. They like bebop, but they also will buy more swing. So these records are selling better than they ever have. The Pablo stuff sonically is fantastic. You can pretty much pick up any Pablo title, pick one that looks good, and they're going to blow you away because sonically they're just so well recorded. One of the first Acoustic Sounds Verve titles, that is Bill Evans Trio 64. Great record. Love Bill Evans. I love all of his stuff on, Riverside, Waltz for Debbie, Village Vanguard. Trio 64, phenomenal. His Verve output is phenomenal. Bill Evans, I will say I have to be in the right mood for it because it's very sullen. Kind of has a very, you got to be in the right mood. If you're in a hot, poppy mood, putting Bill Evans on is not the right mood. But if you're like lounging, the lights down low, you got yourself a scotch, that's Bill Evans. That's Bill Evans time. The Bill Evans output is great. Another just kind of sleeper title from Run Out Groove, that is More of the Monkees. They've done a few of these from Rhino, but they're all analog. These Rhino Run Out Groove Monkees titles, they're analog, cut from the master tape by Kevin Gray. I think Kevin Gray's done all the Monkey stuff. Between Run Out Groove and some different stuff he's done with Rhino Hi-Fi, I think you can get all analog Monkees titles, which is good because you know the thing about the Monkees is originals are always destroyed. Because kids bought these. These were kids' records, kind of like Kiss records from the 70s. Good luck finding clean, minty Kiss records that are original pressings. Very, very difficult. Same thing with the Monkees. Clean copies of these records are almost impossible. I'm a sucker for the Monkees, so this made it to the list. Sonically, this is fantastic. And the last thing I'm going to feature on the list is actually a box set. That is Fleetwood Mac's 1973 to 1974. So this includes Penguin, Mystery to Me, Heroes Are Hard to Find, and Live from the Record Plant, which is not analog. But the other albums are analog. A very underappreciated era for Fleetwood Mac. But this is very reasonable. It's a $100 box set. Great records. They sound phenomenal. These were all done by Chris Bellman. Knocked him out of the park. But yeah, a reasonable box set. Price-wise, and then the live disc, which isn't analog. It's killer, though. Live from the Record Plant. Great live show. But yeah, that is it. All of these, for the most part, can be purchased on the website at theingroove.com. If you go to the main page, theingroove.com, it's the first list featured right on the top. Mike's top 100 imprint analog records you should own. Again, Record Plant is not analog, but the rest of it is. The studio albums in this box set are analog. But there's a few vinyl file titles as of now that you cannot get because they're exclusive to Universal's direct marketing, you know, their direct, whatever the hell their website name is. But I do think, and I hope that will change. You know, the average person going into a record store buying some of these titles, they're not the avid audiophile that is only going to go onto their website to purchase a Nat King Cole record. Most people that buy a Nat King Cole record, Christmas record, they're just your average consumer that are shopping in record stores. So I think and hope that will change. But man, this is a killer list, and everything on this record list is dynamite. I can't recommend it more highly. All right, guys, until next time.